Listen, I'm not here to pump you up with empty words that evaporate the second this video ends. I'm here because somewhere between who you are and who you know you could be, there's a graveyard of half-started dreams, and you've been attending the funeral every single day. The psychologist Carl Jung spent his life studying what he called the shadow self, the parts of us we refuse to acknowledge. But here's what Jung discovered that most people miss. It's not our darkness we're running from, it's our light. We're terrified of what we're capable of because capability comes with responsibility. And responsibility means we can't blame anyone else anymore. You know what? Nobody talks about the relief of giving up. There's a strange comfort in surrender. When you stop trying, you stop failing. When you stop dreaming, you stop being disappointed. When you accept that this is just how things are, you finally get to rest. And that rest feels so good that you mistake it for peace. But it's not peace, it's resignation wearing peace's clothes. Think about this. You've spent more energy defending why you can't than it would have taken to discover if you could. You've invested more time explaining your limitations than exploring your capabilities. You've used more creativity building reasons to stay stuck than it would have required to get unstuck. The math doesn't lie. You're not lacking resources, you're lacking commitment. There's a concept in physics called inertia. An object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. But here's what's brutal about human inertia. The outside force that needs to move you, it's you. You're waiting for someone to push you, and you're the only one who can. You're both the immovable object and the unstoppable force. And you've been choosing immovable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't writing for an audience. He was reminding himself. Even emperors need to remember that the only thing standing between them and action is their own mind's permission. Right now, there are 7 specific ways you're lying to yourself about why your life hasn't changed. Not maybe, not possibly, definitely. These aren't theories. These are the exact patterns that keep people circling the same black for years, wondering why the scenery never changes. And I'm about to show you each one. Not so you feel attacked, but so you finally see the cage you built and realize you're holding the key. Before we go further, hit that like button. Drop a comment with just 3 words. No more excuses. Share this with one person who's stuck in the same loop you are. And subscribe, because we're building something here. A space where excuses come to die and lives come to start. Number 1. Potential without proof is just fantasy. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows us something fascinating. Incompetent people overestimate their abilities, while highly competent people underestimate theirs. But there's a third category nobody talks about. People who are obsessed with their potential but refuse to test it. They live in the beautiful space of, "I could if I wanted to," never realizing that untested potential is just a sophisticated form of lying to yourself. You love talking about what you're going to do. You've got plans, ideas, visions. You can describe your future business in detail. You can explain exactly how you'll transform your body. You can outline the book you'll write, the career you'll build, the life you'll create. You're fluent in the language of someday. But here's your addiction. Potential feels better than proof. As long as it stays in your head, it stays perfect. The business can't fail if you never launch it. The book can't get rejected if you never write it. The dream can't disappoint you if you never chase it. You get to keep your identity as someone capable of great things without ever having to face whether that's actually true. This is why you research endlessly but never start, why you plan meticulously but never execute, why you wait for perfect clarity before taking imperfect action. You're not preparing, you're hiding. You're not being strategic, you're being scared. And you've dressed up your fear in the respectable clothes of being thorough. Meanwhile, someone else, someone with half your talent and twice your courage, just launched the imperfect version of what you've been perfecting in your mind. They're getting real feedback while you're getting imaginary praise. They're learning what actually works while you're theorizing about what might work. They're building proof while you're protecting potential. The gap between who you think you are and who you actually are gets wider every day you don't test yourself. That gap fills with fantasy, and fantasy is comfortable until you realize you've been living in a simulation of your own life instead of your actual life. You don't need another course. You don't need another book. You don't need more time to think about it. You need to do something, anything that produces a result you can measure. Not a feeling, not a plan, a result. Because results are the only truth that matters. And right now, your results are screaming that your potential means nothing without proof. Start ugly, start small, start scared, but start with something that creates evidence of your existence beyond your own imagination. Stop being a museum of unrealized potential and become a laboratory of tested capability. Number 2, being busy doesn't mean moving forward. The British historian Cyril Northcote Parkinson discovered what's now called Parkinson's Law. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. But there's a corollary nobody mentions. Busy work expands to fill the space where real work should be. And we let it, because busy feels productive even when it produces nothing. You're moving. I see you. You're busy, active, always doing something. Your calendar's full, your to-do list is long, you're in constant motion, and motion feels like progress. So you've convinced yourself you're making progress. But are you actually getting anywhere, or are you just traveling in increasingly complex circles? Check your last month. How much of your activity actually moved you toward what matters? How much was just organizational theater? Rearranging your workspace, reorganizing your files, researching tools, comparing options, optimizing systems that don't exist yet. How much time did you spend getting ready to get ready? This is the sophisticated trap. You're not lazy, you're not unmotivated. You're actively engaged, but you're engaged in everything except the one thing that would actually change your situation. You're watering the leaves instead of the roots, polishing the car that never leaves the garage, sharpening tools you never use. The entrepreneur spends months designing the perfect logo but never talks to a single customer. The aspiring writer spends weeks setting up their writing environment but never writes a paragraph. The person wanting to get healthy researches every diet and workout plan but never breaks a sweat. They're all moving, none of them are progressing. Here's how you know the difference. Progress is measurable and uncomfortable. Motion is visible and comfortable. Progress requires you to face your inadequacy. Motion lets you feel productive without being vulnerable. Progress puts you at risk of failure. Motion keeps you safe in the illusion of momentum. You attend workshops but don't implement. You consume content but don't create. You network but don't build. You learn but don't apply. You're choosing education over execution because being a student feels safer than being judged as a practitioner. The brutal question: if you removed all the activity that doesn't directly produce results, what would be left? How much of your work is actually work? And how much is elaborate avoidance dressed up as productivity? Because the hours you spend in motion without progress are hours you're stealing from your own future. Stop counting tasks completed and start counting outcomes created. Stop measuring how busy you are and start measuring how much closer you are to what actually matters. The scoreboard doesn't care how hard you worked, it only shows whether you scored. If you're ready to stop the busy work, comment, "Results matter." Number 3, your past self doesn't own your future. The human mind has what neuroscientists called an interpreter, a part of our brain that constantly creates narratives to explain our behavior, even when those narratives are complete fiction. We're not discovering who we are. We're constantly authoring who we are, and most of us keep writing the same chapter over and over. You walk around saying, "I'm just not a morning person," or "I'm not good with money," or "I'm not the type who exercises," like these are genetic facts written into your DNA. But they're not. They're sentences you said once that became comfortable, so you kept repeating them until they calcified into identity. Here's the thing about identity. It's the most sophisticated excuse you have, because it doesn't sound like an excuse. When you say, I can't do that because it's not who I am, it sounds like self-awareness. It sounds like honesty. It sounds like you're just being realistic about your nature. But what you're actually doing is using your past behavior as a prison for your future possibility. Every addiction recovery program knows this secret. You can't change behavior until you change identity. An alcoholic who says, I'm trying not to drink, still identifies as a drinker who's resisting. But someone who says, I don't drink, has changed their identity. And behavior follows identity like a shadow follows light. You've been running the same personality software so long, you think it's your operating system. But it's not. It's just a program